This story was told by several family members. I remember I was about 12 the first time I heard it. From what I remember, the story is that at some time in the 1930s, a family was travelling across the states trying to make their way to California. They didn't have a lot of money, so they would often just pull over and set up camp and sleep for the night. One stop they made was in a wooded area near the mountains. It was a desolate area, so they figured it would be safe to camp without being bothered. The family was in one large A-frame tent, and some of the kids slept in the car. During the night, their daughter, a young girl, had to go pee, so she got out of the car and went to find a bush to pee behind. She heard screaming and loud banging noises. She was so frightened she stayed in place. After a while of sitting on the ground, crying silently, she looked up over the bush and saw a man with an axe walking away from her and the family's campsite. He had an old-fashioned slouch hat and overalls. He just walked out of sight and disappeared into the woods. When daylight came, she crawled from behind the bush, only to find that all of her family had been hacked to death. She was all alone out in the middle of nowhere. She ran away and started down the path and was eventually found and rescued. Fast forward to today, being the 1980s, when it was told to me that today the site is known for being haunted. Sometimes local hunters hear screaming in the middle of the night, and people see a little girl running. Also, that if you dare to camp in the same location, the Axeman may come and get you. For context, I live with my fiance and our 2 cats and 3 dogs. Today, at around 2:30 p.m, I was heading to the bathroom on one side of my house in order to take a shower, while my fiance was on the other side of the house in his bedroom playing video games. For about 10 minutes as I'm in the shower, nothing unusual happens. But as I go to reach for my conditioner, I hear a loud banging on the bathroom door. It lasted for about 3 seconds, but the whole time it was constant and aggressive. I thought it was my fiance trying to mess with me, as none of my dogs were barking, but decided to check anyway by calling his phone before I left the bathroom. I didn't want to be murdered. I called twice but he didn't answer, but I figured I was overreacting anyway. I head to his room and ask him what had happened, and as soon as I walk in, he turns to me and says, "Has anything creepy happened to you today?" I said, "Yeah, why?" And he told me that when I was in the shower, his bedroom door handle began to jiggle, like someone was trying to open it. He thought I was trying to mess with him. He didn't know I was in the shower, so he grabbed the door handle and opened the door really fast while it was still moving to try and scare me. When he opened the door, no one was there. I asked him if he was the one who was at the door, and he said he had been in his room the whole time. This was confirmed by his brother who had been playing Xbox with him at the time. Around 10 minutes later, we were both in his room, and he went to open his bedroom door, and for a few seconds it wouldn't open, as if someone was holding it shut. We're pretty confused about this and have no idea how to rationalize any of the events that just happened. So my boyfriend and I just moved into our new house, and it was our first time living together. We live in a community that was a huge mining community in the 1840s, so haunted houses are no rare thing up here, as so many men died in the copper mines. We have a puppy as well as a cat, so a lot of these experiences I've chalked up to them moving around, but not anymore. When we first got the keys to the house before we moved any furniture in, our puppy would not come into the house. She would refuse to walk in here and would growl and cry whenever we made her come in. We thought it was just because it was a big old empty house, so maybe it was just weird with none of our scents being in there. Fast forward a few weeks and we are fully moved in, and I start to hear things. It started out as footsteps in the hallway upstairs, when no one but my cat was there, but then moved to hearing voices while in the bathroom or in my room. I tried to write a lot of this off, and really did for the most part. After about a week of living here, we started to notice the kitchen cabinets and drawers would be open when we didn't open them, and things in our pantry would get moved around with both of us denying moving anything. Our puppy, 4 months old now, still would bark and growl at nothing, but again we thought she's just a puppy, so nothing too unusual. Our living room is oddly configured and has French doors on one wall, and on the wall perpendicular is a smaller door. Our couch is on the wall with the small door. We leave that door permanently closed because the couch doesn't fit anywhere else. The door will randomly try to open. It opens in, so with the couch it can't open. Yesterday when I got home, I noticed our puppy in the downstairs hallway playing with a ball that seemed to be moving on its own. She would set it down and it would almost get pushed for her to go play with. This heavily freaked me out, but I tried not to show that I was scared. Now this morning, I swear I heard, "Hello?" in an old woman's voice while I was making breakfast. I tried to convince myself it was just the house creaking or something. Fast forward to maybe 20 minutes ago, and our handyman came over to fix our sink, and he tells my boyfriend that his mother died in the house and at the top of the stairs at 87. I'm so freaked out right now because everything I tried to write off probably was actually this woman. What do I do? Should I introduce myself to her and let her know I respect her house and space and we mean no harm? She was playing with the puppy, so I don't think she's malicious at all. Too long don't read. Been seeing some figures, hearing footsteps and voices in new house. Saw a dog playing with nothing. Found out today that our handyman's mother died in this house. My father is originally from a small ranch in San Luis Potosi. He had a really rough childhood. He endured abuse and extreme poverty, which led him to run away from home at the age of 12 to Mexico City. He was searching for a better life and a means to support himself. He found a job at a bread factory called Bimbo. He was all on his own, getting to work and living in a type of boarding house with other young men. He lived in a dangerous part of town, where he had to catch a train to get to and from work. He had to cross a long road, infamous for its murders and kidnappings. One night after getting out late from Bimbo, he was really tired and had to cross this dangerous road in order to get to his train. Before starting his journey, an older woman warned him about the dangers he may encounter. She reminded him of the murders and the kidnappings. My dad was really tired and just wanted to get home. He told her he was going to walk down the road regardless of the uncertainties. As he started walking, he met up with a man and his young sons. My dad thought to himself, how odd for a father to have his boy walking with him this late at night. It was around 2 a.m. The man started a conversation with my dad. He mentioned the dangers of the road and told my dad, well, now there's 3 of us, no one will mess with us. They continued to talk about trivial things, and my dad went on, and during this conversation, as he approached the train station, he noticed he was no longer accompanied by his new male friend and his son. They'd vanished. My father looked everywhere for them. They were still deep into conversation, just like that, they were gone. Looking back, my father believes the man and the boy were spirits protecting him from the dangers he could have encountered. They made themselves visible to make it appear as if he was not alone. He reassures me, it is a walk he will never forget. I grew up in a very haunted house. The house had 4 main spirits with me, and my siblings nicknamed the family. They were your typical nuclear family. A mom, dad, young boy and girl. As a child I knew that we were not rich, but we weren't poor either. We had a humble upbringing. Both of my parents worked hard to provide for the 5 of us kids. I always had to share a room with my sisters. Not only that, we even had to share a bed. As we grew older, the 3 of us girls no longer fit in the bed together comfortably. So my parents got us a bunk bed. We were so excited. It was a red metal frame bunk bed with a full-size bed on the bottom and a twin up top. Me and my older sister fought about who would have to sleep on the bottom with our little sister, and who would get to sleep on the top all alone. It would be closest thing to our room. I really wanted it. I didn't let up and I won. I didn't know it then, but that would be a mistake that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I mentioned before that my parents worked hard to provide for us. During the work week, they would get up at 3 a.m. and be out of the house by 3:30 to leave for work. We were in charge of getting ourselves ready for school. One early morning, I was awakened to a voice that normally would comfort me. I heard a faint la-la being called out at the door of my room. It sounded like my mom, but it couldn't be. She was gone. She was at work. Not only that, my mom rarely called me Lala. You see, I'm from a Hispanic household, where my parents didn't really show me much affection. My mom only called me that if I was hurt, or if I did something miraculous to make her proud. Once again, I heard Lala being called out. I froze. There was enough daylight in the room, so I mustered up the courage to peek up from under my covers. And at the doorway, there she was, the mom. She was smiling, waving over at me to come. The image of her is forever embedded in my head. She was glowing in a light blue colour, her smile was sinister, her wave was slow motion. I couldn't scream. I was in shock. My body instantly went cold. My bed was drenched in sweat. How could this entity mimic my mom? I covered my entire body with a blanket and prayed she would go away, but I kept hearing her call out. When my sisters woke up, I let them know what had just happened. After that experience, we all slept together on the bottom bunk, even though it was crowded. Every so often after that, you could hear our typical mom noises in the house, such as cabinets in the kitchen being shut as if someone were preparing breakfast, the TV being turned on to a favourite programme. One time my dad stayed home sick from work and he claims the mom jumped into bed with him. I was so haunted by this experience that to this day, I can't sleep alone, and I'm a married adult woman with children. I grew up in the 90s in a typical ranch-style home, in the Sonoran Desert. I moved into the house at just 1 year old and lived here all up until I got married and found a place of my own. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters to share the place with, along with both of my parents. The house was huge. I don't recall the actual square footage, as there were rooms that were add-ons which weren't exactly done with proper permits. All this extra room allowed for the house to be split into 2 sides. The other side was rented out for extra income. To make an extra room for us girl, they put a wall in between of what was once an open concept kitchen and dining room. This is relevant to my paranormal experience in this house. I was in about 1st grade when I first saw the family. It was summer in Arizona, and if you're from here, you know it's monsoon season. Me and my little sister would love to stay up, sneak into the kitchen to look out the window, and just admire the lighting and rainy weather. It was almost a nightly ritual where we would wait for my parents to go to bed and then make our way to admire those stormy nights. However, one night was different. I was becoming more aware. Unusual things had always happened in the house for as long as I could remember, but that was my normal. I'd been here all my life, it's all I've known. I started to get an unsettling feeling, and I begged my little sister for us to go back to bed. She whined a bit, but eventually obliged. We snuck back into our room. My big sister was sound asleep in the middle of the bed, and as we started to get settled, my heart sank at what my eyes saw walk into our room. I was still sitting up when I saw clear as day, in glowing blue luminescent light, father, mother, boy and girl walk into our room and stand at the foot of my bed. The mother was holding a tray, wearing an apron, as she entered her formal dining room, my present bedroom. They stared back at me and my little sister tilted their head as if they were confused as to why we were there. My body was drenched in sweat. I looked over to my little sister and sure enough, she saw the same thing. We screamed for our parents and just like that, they vanished. This was my first of many times seeing an apparition and coming to realise that the things going on in my house weren't quite normal. According to an older neighbour, she claimed that the father killed his wife and kids and then killed himself in that house. I heard this being older and it correlates with the spirits I saw. In the fall of 2020, I moved into my dorm. These dorms were in what used to be an old shoe factory, which seemed odd, but I got free meals for living there, so I decided to live there. I had a roommate who was often out partying and spending the night with her playthings. However, when she was gone, I heard movements in her room. The water turning on from her sink, bed springs, opening and closing dresser drawers, etc. My parents convinced me I was just paranoid, even though my dorm room was always freezing. At the beginning of October, my roommate was quarantining off campus with her boy toy, leaving me alone for 2 weeks. It was midterm week, so I was in my room working on my midterms. The sun was shining through my room, so obviously I saw my shadow. I looked and realised my shadow was backwards and along the wall furthest from me. I was typing on my computer, but my shadow was reversed from me, with long hair while mine was a bob cut, and drawing or writing in a notebook. That's when I realised it wasn't my shadow. I looked outside and no one was out there that could have possibly made the shadow, so I just stared at it, dumbfounded as to what to do. Then she turned to look at me. After seeing me, I saw her pick up her belongings and quickly run out of my room. I panicked and went for a dive, not exactly sure what to do. I decided to go on a Tinder date that night so I wouldn't have to be in my room other than to shower and get dressed. I could hear her in my roommate's room, just minding her business. I never went in there whenever I heard her because I figured she wouldn't want me bothering her. I went on my date and we came back to my room to watch a movie. She was being louder than normal and my date was even freaked out. Once she left, I heard her throwing a tantrum. She repeatedly opened and slammed my roommate's door. I could hear her rustling louder and louder, so I immediately packed some bags and went to my date's dorm, which was in the same building. He and I have been together ever since. My roommate was quarantining with a boy toy that actually was my brother's roommate. When their quarantine was over, my brother let me move in and I've been living with him ever since. My roommate dropped out and we had a falling out over personal stuff, so I don't know what happened after I'd left. I'm still rather shook up about what happened and I remember it all like it was yesterday. I refuse to step into that building ever since. One of the most hair-raising sounds I have ever heard was the low grumble, pissed off sound of a cat. Now, add the fact that we didn't own a cat, and this cat was probably dead made it all worse. One day while in my room at the top of the stairs, I heard the sound. The sound came from the kitchen, which was just at the landing of the stairs. I immediately shot straight up in my bed and looked at the stairwell. I paused for a second and then ran downstairs to get our dog Duchess. I brought her to the kitchen and kept saying, "Get the kitty, Duchess. Where's the kitty? Where is it?" My dog looked around and smelled the surrounding cabinets and got no hint of cat. I thought this was the oddest thing because I knew there was no way a cat got in without the dogs going berserk. My brother, owner of the gun cabinet, came home one day, and as he came upstairs and walked to his room, I mentioned my experience. He laughed and told me to go to bed. A few days later, I was in my room and all he said as he got to the landing coming up was a simple, "Sorry." This was as shocking as the cat since he never apologised for anything, no matter how wrong he was. Flabbergasted, I asked, "For what?" in a shocked voice. He said, "Last night I was watching TV and I heard that fucking cat. It made the low, in-heat type growl that a cat makes when it's pissed off. But when I turned around, there was nothing fucking there. I got up and checked the window and no footprints either." His room had a window and a small roof that overhung the front porch, and this was covered in snow as it was winter time. My first words were, "I told you so." I think what made the sound worse was the fact that it wasn't the pissed off hissed cats make as they show their teeth. This low mad growl would go for a few seconds, long enough for you to look in the general direction of the sound but see nothing. I would rather deal with a live pissed off cat that can attack me versus a dead pissed off cat that I can hear and feel but can't see. Growing up, my family has been subject to the paranormal in many ways: visual, audio, smelling, and touching. My father was a non-believer till the day he died, always made a logical reason for the bump or bang. Our basement was a nice, cool place to be, especially in the summer months as it retained its cooler temperature. For as long as we can remember, a spirit remained down there and was receptive to company of the living. We used to play Monopoly at the dining room table, and we would hear the squeaky chairs, and then he would look at the door as the knob jiggled. Sometimes the door opened and sometimes just a jiggle, as if some days it had the energy and others not. When my mother would do laundry, she only went to the basement in the company of one of our two black Labradors, Duke and/or Duchess. She hated going down there because she was the very religious one and just hated the feeling of someone behind her. I'd go down there and sleep often as my dad was too cheap to install the AC units, and it was much cooler. I never really felt scared, but I did know I was not alone. Often I would hear the light switch click on and off. I remember my bike was flipped upside down and had the little beads on the spokes that would tinker-tanker as the kid spun a tyre slowly. One time he must have gotten spooked because I got spooked. He spun the tyre when I was down there watching TV. I got up and started to leave the basement thinking not today, and I felt him behind me as if escorting me out. I started to run and I felt the adrenaline as if my friend was about to take me in a game of tag. My dad was an electrician and installed the metal switches with lights green and red indicating current or no current flow. The switches controlled everything from each individual light and the TV. Imagine a circuit breaker, that's how the electricity was controlled. You could hear these metallic clicks from 100 feet away. After we did some digging, we learned through the library that a kid, Stephen, hung himself as a teenager from severe depression. This was not too often, but not uncommon for patients to be treated back in the day. It was sometime in 52 or 53 that this happened, if I remember correctly. My hair just stood up as I recall the next bit. In the laundry room, directly behind the washer and dryer, was our furnace. Above and just off to the side remained the pulley the young man attached to the joist. This is why my mother hated doing laundry. As soon as the dogs acted funny or raised their hair on the backbone, she was out of there like a bat out of hell. The kid never did anything malicious, but he sure got satisfaction knowing that he got to you. As long as you could close your eyes, let the chills pass you as you kind of raised your head, and cocked as if you wanted to tell but holding it in, it passed and then you could continue what you were doing. I think he liked my mom the most because she never stood her ground, and besides the one time I ran, I usually did too. I think what really gets under my skin was the cat that left no footprints in the winter. My mom told me she used to live in an old house back in the day in Toronto, I think in the 80s if I'm not mistaken. They used to sleep in the same room in two separate beds across from each other. My mom told me that at 3 a.m. there was always a voice calling her name and telling her to come here, and the voices came from under the bed. My mom would get really scared, and my aunt, who claims she can see and feel spirits, would always pretend to be asleep, but unaware, my mom thought she'd never heard the voices. My aunt always heard them, but they would never call her name, only my mom's. They told my grandparents, but my grandparents would never believe them, until one time my grandfather was home alone in that house, and apparently he was just making himself a snack, when according to my mom, he told her he's seen what was calling her name, but he could never describe it, couldn't even bring it up. He would always be too scared at even the thought of talking about it. Shortly after that, thank God, they decided to move from that house. I always had a hard time believing the story, but my aunt always told me it was real. And I also had a hard time believing my aunt too. Until one day my cousin was in the hospital. He was in ICU, in a bad shape. When I went to visit him, he was supposedly alive according to the doctor, but my aunt came out of the room bawling her eyes out. When I asked what was wrong, she told me my cousin had already passed. She'd seen his spirit looking over his body on the hospital bed. The next day, he sadly passed away. And that's when I realised everything my mom told me was true. The way my mom is, till this day, because of what happened, is sad. She's always worried about everybody, always paranoid about the stuff that happened. And once I realised it was true, I can't even imagine what my grandfather seen on that day. My grandfather passed later on when I was in high school and never described what he saw. Sometimes I wish he did, but maybe him not describing it to my mom might have been the best thing. Maybe there's a possibility my mom would have been worse than she is now if he told her what he's seen. That's my story and just thought I'd share. For everybody that read this, thanks for taking the time too. My grandma passed away back in 2018. My family and I were saddened by her loss, but we found comfort in knowing that after a few years of being in and out of the hospital for various illnesses related to old age and the near lifelong battle with major depression, she died peacefully, in her sleep, and was finally free from suffering. So fast forward to last spring, around a year and a half after my grandma's passing, we were a few months into quarantine when I started to feel extremely overwhelmed by the chaotic state of the world. Coping with the feelings of isolation and loneliness from being away from my friends at college was very difficult, and my mental health was on a rapid decline. I know I'm not alone in this boat. Panic attacks slowly became a near daily occurrence for me, and along with that, I fell into a deep depression. Now, I've always struggled with depression and anxiety, but it had always been pretty manageable up until that point. As time went on, I felt more and more hopeless, like the world was never going to return back to normal. On a particularly bad night, I was at a very low point and cried myself to sleep. It was then I had the strangest dream, which felt so real. It was a very sunny day, no clouds in the sky, and I was standing outside of the Catholic church my family raised me in. Even though the parking lot as well as the church appeared to be completely empty, I knew I wasn't alone. I don't know how to explain it, but my dream self sensed another presence there with me. I walked up the steps, entered the church, and began to wander around in search of this presence. After doing some exploring, I turned the corner and found myself at the doors of the back of the church, which was used as a multi-purpose room. I opened the door, only to find my grandma sitting in the centre of the room. She smiled at me with the biggest grin, let one of her little laughs while saying, "I'm so glad to see you," then mentioned me to come sit in the chair next to her. She stood up and gave me a hug before we sat back down. We had a very long conversation, majority of which is a little fuzzy. I can't remember exactly what was said, but I know it had to do with anxiety and depression, which she had greatly suffered from. I remember at one point, my grandma grabbed my hands tightly, looked me in my eyes and told me, "Keep holding on, you'll get through this." She then glanced up into the skylight directly above us, looked back at me and uttered, "Everything is going to be okay, I promise," before promptly vanishing into the light. Now I don't know if that was just a weird, random dream I had, but something about it seemed special. I'd never had a dream about my grandma, nor any deceased relative prior to this, and haven't had one since. I know this isn't necessarily your typical ghost story, but I thought I would share it since it seems, to me at least, that she appeared in my dream to visit me and give me that message when I needed to hear it most. Whatever this was, it gave me a great sense of calm and peace in a way, that if she got through it, so can I. About 4 years ago now, I was picking fruit on a cherry orchard I worked at for years. I worked there since I was 12. I was 18 at the time. I was smoking weed heavily, and I have BPD, so I attribute what I saw to hallucinations. Although when I initially had the experience, things were going as they usually would, no real problem beforehand. I'd worked all day, and after work, things were normal. I had a shower, laid in bed, and relaxed watching TV. As day drifted to night, I started to smoke a bit. I was happy, chilled out, stone things, where normal it was cool. It got deeper into the night, and I decided I wanted to try sleep. I've always struggled with sleep, so I tend to have to lay there for a while sometimes. I had the sunroof of the van open as it was hot as hell. It must have been about 11 or 12 PM at the time, and I couldn't sleep. This is where things get fucked. I always sleep on my side and I switch around if I'm uncomfortable, changing sides. As I was changing sides, I noticed just a white glimmer through the sunroof. I quickly laid to my back and saw it clear as day. It was the palest white face staring right at me with this vivid glance of what seemed to be anger or disappointment. I was absolutely terrified. I couldn't fucking move. I closed my eyes. It was still there. I couldn't even think. I was stuck with fear. I would stare up at this white face. It looked to be an Asian girl. I know that sounds funny, but that's what I saw. I am not scared of Asian girls too. I would close my eyes constantly, hoping the fucking thing would disappear, but it just wouldn't leave. For hours I was staring at this fucking thing. I came to the conclusion that this must have been a sick fucking prank. I must have pissed someone off. I got out of bed purposefully, not staring through the sunroof, and banged on the side of my van as loud as I could. I yelled, "Get the fuck off my van, this isn't funny." I laid back in bed and reluctantly looked through the gap again. It was still there, this angry fucking palest white face you could ever see. It looked like one of those grudge things sometimes you would see in some Asian horror movie, the real fucked ones. Mind you, I had never heard of a grudge or watched any Asian horror films at this point, so I didn't have some preconceived notion in my head. Eventually, I decided I would just lay on my side and close my eyes for good. I took a few glances here and there out of curiosity, although I was terrified. My curiosity just peaked. It was still there every time it looked. It seemed every time I looked, the face remained angry, like I had wronged it or something. But over time, the stare became more sinister, like it was going to do something. Fucking scariest thing I have ever been through. Eventually, after seemed like what a decade of waiting, it was day and it was gone. The first thing I did was walk around the park asking everyone if they were playing a prank on me. They all just looked at me like some sort of fool. I worked half the day. It rained, I didn't sleep after work. I couldn't. I stupidly decided to smoke. I then freaked the hell out. I spent hours in a trance of paranoia and fear. At this point, I was in full psychosis. I'd convinced myself there was a ghost haunting me. BPD delusional episodes thought cannibals were trying to eat me. People I cared about wanted me dead. A spiral into madness, but it all stemmed from what I saw the night previously. It was the initial delusion. The people I care about helped me get admitted to a psych ward, and I couldn't thank them enough. I was mentally gone. It took about 2 weeks for me to gain my sanity back. It was terrifying. I've tried to attribute what I saw to lack of sleep, but I'm up for 30 to 40 hours sometimes. I don't see anything apart from the weird things out of the corner of my eye, but that's normal for most people. I quit weed at that point too. It was hard, as I would smoke as much as I could every day beforehand. I've smoked since, but wouldn't be more than 5 to 10 times in around 4 years. Funny thing is, my tolerance was dead a few of those times. I was the highest I had ever felt since I first smoked, and I smoked a lot. I got very anxious and paranoid, but I didn't see a thing though. I've taken strong hallucinogens. Haven't seen a bad thing, no ghosts, nothing that vivid either. Just cool visuals, time distortion and weird feelings. No people or animals or ghosts, just a massive alteration of what reality is. How I saw reality was different cool. A lot of colours, euphoric magnificence in what was normally insignificant. Hallucinogens have been more harmless than anything I have done. That's coming from someone with BPD and a severe anxiety disorder. I'm not trying to advertise hallucinogens. They can bring a fuck ton of negativity to certain people. If you do try them, make sure you're in a really good headspace, otherwise they can fuck you really bad. I told a family member the ghost story, and she jokingly brought up the fact that an old Asian gold miner ghost was haunting me. Turns out the orchid I worked on was an old gold field. In fact, the farm that it was on was riddled with them. A bunch of Chinese people came to Australia during the gold rush. Things were crazy back then, the town, and I'm from Young. In New South Wales, I was working on a big history. A lot of them were subject to racism. I've heard stories of farmers hanging them, etc. Some really terrible shit. I remember when I left the psych ward, I was at a family member's. I just got out of the shower, and through the window of the bathroom I got a glance of it again, and it was fucking smiling. My dumbass stuck my finger up at it. That was the last time I saw it. I still try to tell myself constantly that it was a result of visual hallucinations as a result of psychosis. But there's a superstitious part of me that has taken everything into account and feels something was up.